Good day and welcome to Quilting with Don. I'm Don. Paper piecing. Yes, I'm going to tackle something that I haven't done before, which those who have watched my videos before know that I don't mind trying something new. As in fact, if you're just tuning in for the first time, a quick recap on the quilts I've already done. This is now going to be my 5th quilt, and I'll come to that in a bit. But first of all, 2-3 years ago, I did this cool rail fence quilt called Lap Kitties. See it behind me here. And it was neat because it was a traditional rail fence without kitty cat appliques, and it was fun. I got to practice sewing and applique. Then the second quilt I did involved a lot of triangles, 792 if memory serves me correctly, and it made a 3-dimensional pattern. And the quilt itself was called Vista Boxes. I displayed this one in the recent quilt show in Parksville. Then my third quilt, which is so far my chef-d'oeuvre, my masterpiece, is the Eye of Sauron Bargello quilt. You see it on the wall behind me now. What was really cool about that was the color selection, the pattern, and even the Lord of the Rings style script that I appliqued onto it. The whole combination made it a stunning quilt, and it even got an honorable mention at the quilt show. That's not bad for, more or less my 3rd quilt out of the box and getting an honorable mention at a show with 500 quilts. So I'm really excited about that. The quilt I just finished a little while ago, didn't get into the quilt show though, was called Bursting Forth. So you see it on the wall behind me. What's cool about this quilt is it was precision piecing of fabric. So I ended up using the Scan and Cut, which is a automated fabric cutter, a magic cutter of all sorts of things. And so I scanned in the pattern, the pieces, cut them, and then assembled them into what you see in Bursting Forth. So that gave me the idea, all right, I'm already into precision piecing. Let's try this paper piecing thing because that seems to be pretty good. I saw many, many impressive paper pieced quilts at the quilt show and it inspired me. So I did a bit of research, and at our wonderful guild's library, for which I'm a member of the guild, not the library, I came across this book here called, and I'll show you up on the screen, it's called Quick Strip Paper Piecing by Peggy Martin. Came out in 2003. But this is one of those things, I'm sure, as in many techniques in quilting, there may be modern and newfangled sexy ideas and new rulers, but I think paper piecing has been around for a while, and I think the techniques more or less haven't changed. There are going to be some optimizations, and I'll show you some I've already discovered. We'll get to that. So, paper piecing, what's that all about? Well, I even went through the book, and as you know me, I like to do tests. And the very first pattern in this book, she is explained very clearly how you do it. So here's the pattern on the screen. You follow the directions. It's almost like paint by number, but it's piece by numbers. So you can see on what's on the screen. This one is actually from. I gotta get my glasses on here. It's called a spinning star. It's in the book. It's the very first one. And so you take a look at the pattern, and you say, all right, I'm going to assemble piece 1 and piece 2. And you sew. Well, use the arrow between those 2 pieces to show you which way you position the fabric, and then you sew the line. Then you do the next piece between 2 and 3, and between 3 and 4, and so on. And so, following that pattern, I actually did a test, and I made this piece of fabric. I just used some of my scraps just to show I could do it. Now the paper's gone, but when you're sewing it, the paper stays, and it keeps everything together and nicely lined up, and it comes out great. Yay! So then that convinced me I can do this, and I read a bit more of the instructions. And in the next episode, I'm going to actually start paper piecing, and I'll show you the process in detail. I'm not going to get into it here. You'll have to wait. But I did pick the design I want to do, and it is called. This whole book is filled with star patterns. It's really neat. I guess those lend themselves well to paper piecing. And the one I'm going to do is called Blazing Star. So here's the pattern on the screen for a section. It's an 8-sided piece. If you recall, Bursting Forth was 6-sided. This is going to be 8-sided. But then you pad the corners to make it into a rectangle, and I'm going to probably do that. So what I'm going to do is take this pattern and make it into a single starred quilt. It'll be about 20, 22 inches on the side, depending on, and it may be bigger if I add borders. But I'm making something small. Eye of Sauron was over 100 inches by 100 inches. That's massive. There's nowhere in this house where I can hang Eye of Sauron. I don't know what to do with it. It's gorgeous. It showed well in the show, but short of putting it on a bed, what do I do with it? So anyway, I'll come back to that later, I suspect, too, and figure out what I'm going to do with Eye of Sauron. This is now going to show me, and so I'll show you how to do a simple, relatively simple paper piecing project. Of course, the one I picked, this Blazing Star, is not the simplest one in the book. It's one of the more complicated ones, only because, like when you do Y seams, you got to be careful where you start and stop sewing. But that's it. I'm already good at doing that, so I figure, so of course this time I also did a test with more of my scrap fabric, and this is one of the pieces from Blazing Star. And you'll see on the back, there's the actual paper. I didn't take it off yet. So it follows the pattern. Yeah. Now, okay, doing both demos, this one for the initial pattern and this one for the Blazing Star, I learned a couple of major things, and I'm going to apply them for sure in this quilt. The first thing is that the concept of cutting strips of fabric and then taking those to use for your piecing is good, because you minimize waste in the sense that you've got strips. You're not chunking pieces out of willy-nilly out of the fabric to be pieced. So strips are nice to work with. You cut them to a certain width and away you go. But what I didn't like about the methodology in this book, and again I'll explain more detail when I get into it in the next episode, is that there's a fair bit of waste, because even though you're using strips, you're only using a piece of the strip each time, and you're cutting out the rest and never to be used again, unless you're smart. So I'm now going to do a hybrid of what I did with the bursting forth, where I cut the fabric into precise shapes. I'm going to do a hybrid in the sense that I'm going to use my strips, and I'll show you this episode. I'm going to cut my strips and then block out the various shapes that you need in the pattern. That way it'll tell me, I'll be able to figure how much fabric I need of each color and go from there without wasting too much fabric. So that's the plan. So before we get into the last thing, sorry I'm dragging on a bit here. I'm picking my colors, at least visually. I'm not there yet. I haven't actually looked at fabric. That's next episode. But the original pattern showed these colors. It was yellows and oranges, light and dark greens, and some dark reds, and then a blue background. So my first idea was to change it up like this, with light and blue, light and dark blues points, light and dark green points, and then some lighter red fillers, and then a blue background. And the blue, I decided I want something more like a starry sky, so I want some texture to the blue background. And then the next design I came up with is, maybe instead of blues, I'll use purples, because Carolyn has lots of purple fabric. She likes purple. I haven't done anything with purple yet. Correction, Vista Boxes had purple, but I like purple too. So again, when I start actually picking fabrics, I'll get a much better appreciation for the look I'm going for, but I am aiming towards, my first approximation is that design you see on the screen now. All right, now I'm going to cut you into the process of, the hybrid process of cutting my fabric that I'm going to follow. So to do that, you got to make templates. Luckily, templates are made out of paper, so let me show you how I do it. For cutting fabric, here is one of the Blazing Star sections. There's this, and of course, well actually, there's a mirror one. I have blown these up to 150% of the original pattern, because that's the size of quilt I want to do. These are actually going to be the size and shapes I'm going to use for my quilt. So all you have to do then is figure out how much material you need for each of these shapes, and of course allowing a seam allowance, right? So first thing you do is, very simply, I'm going to cut out the shapes. Nothing more complicated than that. Now I'm just going to cut these apart following reverse order. So I'll start with a 5-4, 4-3, well anyway, you'll see. You just have to deconstruct it. So there we are. I've got my 5 pieces. And you're saying to yourself, well, what about the seam allowances? This is where you get a little creative. I thought about doing this a high-tech way, and I realized, no, the easiest way is just to do it using paper and glue. So I got a glue stick. Nothing more fancy than that. Glue stick. Okay, so I'm just going to glue them on. Now you don't have to get fancy in this. I could do a really good gluing job, but yeah, why overdo it? Now I'm going to show you something really cool. Out of Miss Carolyn's stash, for using paper piecing, she's got these cool rulers. And it looks like a regular ruler, but on the back side it's got an actual edge that will butt up against, for example, this ruler. So it'll butt up, look at that. And it gives you a 1/4 inch for drawing and for cutting. So when you're doing your seams, you got a neat fast 1/4 inch mark. So now I'm just going to start drawing 1/4 inch seams around these shapes, right? Because this ruler butts up against nicely against the paper. Look at that. And done. So now you can see I have hand drawn out the 1/4 inch seams. So the next thing I do is cut those out. What I've got here is a minimum piece of fabric I need for each piece in the paper pieced pattern, if you will. Okay, voila. Now I've got pieces, these little templates represent how much each piece of fabric, or how big each piece of fabric will be. Ah! So you're saying, well, so what? I mean, I'm not going to use these to actually do the paper piecing. I'm going to use the original pattern. I'll obviously make copies of these. But the point is, all right, pretend this is my strip of fabric, all right? And I want to cut out all the pieces that I need for A1. Well, then all you do is this. I take a look at my fabric. Let's just say this is a strip that's, oh, I don't know, a couple inches wide. You can see right away how wide you're going to need. And then you block out how many pieces you're going to cut. And you cut them roughly this, maybe a bit bigger, just to give yourself a margin. But now when I'm piecing this together, following the original pattern, these are my pieces of fabric. As long as I line them up right, they should be able to piece together without having a lot of waste. Because, right, I'm no longer going to waste much fabric. Because I'm going to be able to cut out these shapes. I'll pad them. I will. I'm giving myself a bit of extra working space. And when I did the calculations, it's surprisingly little fabric I need for this. for A1, for example, I need a 2-inch strip times about 30 inches. Not even a full width of fabric. For A2, I need the 2 1/4 inch strip, about 36 inches, and so on. A3. I need a 3-inch wide strip, 28 inches. And this is with a lot of padding to make sure I don't put myself into a corner. For A4, it's a 2 1/8 inch strip, 40 inches, almost an entire width of fabric. And for A5, it actually, by being smart and making it a little wider than I technically needed, I could then fit it into an entire 2-inch strip, which is going to be width of fabric, but I need about 40 inches. So there we are. So it's all good to go. Well, it'll probably make more sense in the next episode what the heck I just talked about, because now I'm starting to think that sounds a little complicated. It's not really. I'm just calculating how much fabric I need. When I start paper piecing, I'm going to be using the patterns. But I will have my fabric cut into roughly these shapes, so I can minimize the wasted fabric. All right? So stay tuned for the next episode. I'm sure I can get the piecing done in easily one episode and go from there. So the next episode, you'll see results. I'll have picked my fabric and I will start cutting and sewing using the paper piecing. And I will explain the precise paper piecing method that I'm using, which is actually more or less in the book, with a couple tweaks that Carolyn has already shown me. All right? So stay tuned. Looking forward to it. Cheers.